The scariest parts of you are not your failures, not your wounds, not your fears. The scariest parts of you are the ones you pretend don't exist. The anger you hide behind politeness, the envy you mask with compliments, the self-hatred buried under 1,000 achievements. And the more you avoid them, the louder they become. The more you suppress them, the more they shape your life from the shadows. This is not poetry. This is psychological law. What you do not face will run you. What you exile will lead. What you repress will possess. You are not being haunted by the past. You are being controlled by the parts of yourself you refuse to love. And you call it fate. You call it bad luck. You call it just how I am. No, that voice in your head that sabotages every opportunity, that's your shadow. That panic that arises every time love gets too close, that's your shadow. That explosion when someone disrespects you, not because they're wrong, but because they touched the wound you never healed, that's your shadow. And until you turn around, until you look it in the eyes, it will rule you. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And he was right, because true growth isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. You think you need more positivity, but what you really need is more honesty. Honesty about the resentment you carry. Honesty about the roles you play. Honesty about the person you've been pretending to be to keep people comfortable. Because the shadow is built not from evil, but from avoidance. Every time you said yes when your soul screamed no, shadow. Every time you smiled while being disrespected, shadow. Every time you broke your own heart to protect someone else's comfort, you handed a piece of your power to the darkness. But this isn't about shame. This is about freedom. Because there's nothing more powerful than a person who's walked through their own fire and lived. A person who has sat in the rubble of their own lies and decided to rebuild in truth. That's where symphoria begins. That state of psychological euphoria that only comes when you stop fearing your own depth and start mining it for wisdom. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are simply filled with rooms you've never dared enter. And now you've found the key. This is where your mindset must evolve. Not into optimism, but into courage. The courage to say, I will no longer pretend. I will no longer perform. I will no longer protect the parts of me that poison me. A strong mindset isn't just positive. It's penetrating. It questions everything. It challenges your reflexes. It doesn't flinch when the ego starts to scream, because the ego will scream. The moment you try to evolve, it will throw every story at you. You're fine as you are. This is too hard. Don't go digging where it hurts. But healing requires excavation. And excavation requires discomfort. The strong mind doesn't avoid discomfort. It walks straight into it with open eyes and a steady heart, because it knows the only way out is through. And walking through the fire requires a new belief system, one that doesn't treat discomfort as danger, one that doesn't treat pain as punishment, one that doesn't treat your past as a prison. You must believe the truth will not destroy you. It will reveal you. You must believe that everything you buried is not evil, but injured. The child in you who never got to speak, the teenager in you who was punished for expressing rage, the adult in you who performs success while suffocating in silence, they are not your enemies. They are pieces of you calling to be integrated. And you cannot transcend what you won't acknowledge. You cannot master what you refuse to meet. You must believe that what's inside you is not too much, not too dark, not too broken. It's just unloved. And when you finally choose to see it, to speak to it, to hold it without judgment, you stop being a slave to the shadow. You become its witness. And the moment you witness your shadow, you begin to reclaim your power. From that witnessing comes clarity. Clarity that isn't pleasant at first. It hurts. It stings. It reveals the masks you thought were your face. It shows you where you were living a life based on survival, not authenticity. You see the relationships that were built on trauma bonding. You see the goals that were built on ego inflation. You see the behaviors that were never yours, just inherited adaptations, and you grieve. You grieve the time you lost. You grieve the peace you postponed. You grieve the identity that wasn't built by you, but for you. But clarity gives you back your sight. And once you see clearly, you can choose intentionally, not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of sovereignty. That's when life begins to reshape. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And with that reshaping comes vision. But this time, it's not fantasy. It's not a projection of your insecurity. It's a vision born of wholeness. A vision anchored in reality, not reaction. A vision that doesn't beg to be seen, but commands silence when it speaks. Because now, you're no longer building a life to outrun your shadow. You're building a life with it. You bring your wounds to the table. You bring your darkness into the light. And you stop hiding from the parts of you that were born for depth. Your vision becomes expansive, not because you've escaped your pain, but because you've transformed it into purpose. This isn't the life they told you to build. This is the life only you could build. A life rooted in truth. A life free from pretending. A life strong enough to carry the entire you, not just the polished version. And that kind of vision terrifies people still addicted to illusion. But that's not your concern anymore. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be real. Good. Because when vision becomes real, when it's no longer about escape but embodiment, you finally arrive at what most people spend their lives avoiding. Purpose, not the purpose they package for you, not the one found in resumes, roles, or titles, but the soul contract kind, the kind that emerges only after the masks fall, after the lies burn, after the shadow is invited in and offered a seat at your table instead of a lock and key. This purpose doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, a persistent pull, a sacred ache, a knowing that says, this is the work only you can do, because only you've walked the path required to carry it. Your shadow wasn't a curse, it was your initiation. Everything you thought disqualified you, your grief, your shame, your rage, your fear, that was the tuition for your awakening. Now, purpose no longer sounds like ambition. It sounds like alignment. It sounds like integrity. It sounds like silence that no longer seeks applause to feel real. You are not chasing purpose now. You're becoming it. Every word you speak, every boundary you enforce, every time you show up in truth, without performance, without armor. Purpose is not what you do. It's how you carry who you are when no one's watching. And to carry purpose through the chaos of the world, you need something far deeper than motivation. You need discipline, the ancient kind, the kind rooted in reverence, not punishment. Discipline that says, this version of me cannot walk where I'm going, so I will become someone new again and again until my soul is fully expressed in this lifetime. Discipline is holy. It's how you protect your purpose from distractions that dress up as opportunities. It's how you move, even when your mind says rest, not out of burnout, but out of devotion. This is the devotion of warriors, of mystics, of revolutionaries, because to live awake in a sleeping world is to be under constant pressure to fall back into who you were. Discipline is the inner vow that says, I refuse. I refuse to betray myself for comfort. I refuse to return to numbness. I refuse to perform for love that should be free. I refuse to explain truth to those addicted to illusion. Discipline doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to return again and again to your breath, to your body, to your center, to your truth, especially when the world is screaming otherwise. From that center, you act, not impulsively, not reactively, but with sacred action. Because once you've faced your shadow, your actions become surgical, precise, potent. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer move to be seen. You act because your existence has weight now. Your time is sacred. Your energy is currency. Your presence is a portal. You move with clarity. You speak with direction. You rest with purpose. Action is no longer about control. It's about creation. And the life you're building now was never meant to look like anyone else's. It's been carved from your depths. It's been forged in the quiet of your healing. It's been lit by the torch of everything you once buried. You don't owe anyone a roadmap. You don't need their confirmation. Your action is your confirmation, and it moves worlds. But even the most grounded action is nothing if it isn't infused with emotional mastery. This is where the weak collapse, where the immature react, where the world keeps you chasing feelings instead of forging freedom. But not you, not anymore, because you understand now, feelings are not facts, and pain is not prophecy. Yes, feel. Yes, allow. Yes, honor. But do not bow. Do not build altars to passing weather. Do not assign identity to transient emotions. You are allowed to feel rage and not destroy. You are allowed to feel grief and still lead. You are allowed to feel lost and still trust your feet. Emotional mastery is not control. It is coherence. It's the ability to feel everything fully without letting anything override who you are. This is what makes you terrifying to people who haven't met their own soul. Because your peace can't be shaken. Because your clarity isn't rented. Because your love doesn't flinch in the presence of discomfort. That is strength. That is sovereignty. That is real power. And when the emotions settle, when the chaos clears, you enter the most sacred phase of all, integration. The moment you stop trying to fix yourself and start trying to remember yourself, you bring all the pieces back. The wild, the wounded, the brilliant, the broken, the one who wanted to run, the one who stayed, the one who tried and failed and tried again. You stop amputating your past. You stop editing your truth. You stop censoring your passion. You gather it all. And for the first time, you stand whole. Not healed like a Hollywood ending, Not perfect, like a self-help cliche, but honest, present, untamed, alive. And that's when the shadow no longer controls you, because you're no longer ashamed of it. You've given it a name, you've given it a voice, you've given it love. And in return, it gives you your power back. Good. Because once you've integrated the shadow, once you've stopped fighting yourself and started walking with yourself, you don't just change, you become unshakable. This is resilience not as the world defines it, but as your soul embodies it. Resilience is not being untouched by life. It's being transformed by it without being owned by it. It's crying without collapsing. It's bleeding without blaming. It's standing in the storm and saying, I've already been to hell, and I came back with light. Resilience is when betrayal no longer turns to bitterness, when failure no longer becomes identity, when pain becomes information, not identity. You've become immune to destruction because you no longer resist your own becoming. They can take everything from you: title, praise, money, applause, but they can't take what you've built in the dark. They can't take the strength forged in silence. They can't take the self you've met in the fire, because that self, that through you, is no longer a theory. It's no longer a possibility. It's a ground beneath your feet. And now that you've stood in the fire, you start to seek something deeper. Not more answers, not more validation, but learning, the kind that doesn't come from books, the kind that doesn't fit neatly into quotes, the kind that comes from watching yourself through every breakdown and asking, what is this here to teach me? You don't ask, why is this happening to me? You ask, what is this sculpting me into? You become a student of your own evolution. You study your silence. You study your rage. You study your triggers because they are not weaknesses. They are windows. Each one points to a place within you that still longs to be seen, to be understood, to be set free. And you give yourself the one thing no one else could ever offer: awareness without punishment. That is sacred learning. It's what separates those who repeat patterns from those who rewrite bloodlines. You are not here to pass on pain. You are here to break the cycle with presence. And to do that, you must become water. You must become adaptable. You must unhook yourself from the illusion of control, from the fantasy that safety lies in certainty. There is no map for a soul like yours. There are only instincts, only moments, only inner truths that guide your next breath. Adaptability is the weapon of the awakened. It is how you bend without breaking, how you shift without losing center, how you move through endings without mistaking them for failure. You don't cling. You adjust. You don't demand the world to make room. You become the room. And in doing so, you terrify those still clinging to the static. Because you've proven you don't need predictability to feel peace. You've proven you can be whole even as the world rearranges itself around you. That kind of soul, that kind of mind, that kind of heart is one that lives in gratitude, but not the shallow kind, not thank you for this latte kind, not toxic gratitude that tells you to ignore pain. This is sacred gratitude, the kind that looks at the hardest parts of your life and says, thank you for the breaking. Thank you for the abandonment. It brought me back to me. Thank you for the pain. It carved space for purpose. Thank you for the silence. It taught me to listen inward. This gratitude doesn't bypass the dark. It blesses it. It doesn't paint over the past. It reclaims it. It doesn't say, that shouldn't have happened. It says, it shaped me into someone I'd die to protect now. That's what gratitude does when it's real. It turns suffering into soil. It turns endings into initiations. It turns a life you hated into a life that built you. And for that you bow, not to the pain, but to the you who made it through. And now, here you are. Not who you were. Not who they wanted. Not who you pretended to be to survive. You are something else entirely. You are the child of chaos and clarity. The fusion of fire and stillness. The paradox they can't define because you don't need to be defined anymore. You faced your shadow. You've seen what it can do when left unseen, and what it becomes when loved. You've turned pain into power, silence into strength, wounds into wisdom, and now you are free. Not because the world changed, but because you no longer needed to. You are free because you remembered who you are and chose that self over safety. Again and again and again, you are no longer at war with yourself. And that is the most terrifying kind of peace. Because nothing owns you now. Not shame, not guilt, not expectation, not fear. You walk clean. You walk whole. You walk with the shadow behind you. Not dragging you, but moving with you. Integrated, respected, balanced. And anyone who looks in your eyes now knows they are not just seeing a person. They are witnessing a soul that has come home. And no illusion can survive in the presence of someone who has made peace with all that they are. Your shadow will control you until you face it. Know that you have nothing can control you again, ever.